Hey friends, tonight, let's explore why camels, those grumpy, haughty, elegantly awkward beasts, once marched across deserts with actual wooden castles strapped to their backs. The stars are already high above you, winking through the dry night air like gossiping neighbors. The sand beneath your feet is still warm from the day, and the wind carries the scent of myrrh dust and something else. Wood smoke. No, wait, that's timber. And it's moving, because there, lumbering through the moonlight, is a camel, a huge dromedary beast with the poise of a queen and the sneer of a librarian who's seen too many overdue scrolls. And on its back, a whole structure, a watchtower, a mobile castle swaying like a drunk noble on festival night. You're not dreaming, you're witnessing a real medieval war camel. This isn't fantasy. This actually happened in parts of the medieval Islamic world, notably among Arab and Persian forces. Camels weren't just pack animals. They were part of military architecture. You've heard of war, elephants, maybe even war pigs. We'll talk about them another night. But war camels, they had range. Camels were adapted not just for endurance, but for elevation. With specialized wooden howdahs, boxy fortifications built like mini towers, they became high ground platforms on four legs. Imagine you're an archer perched inside that wooden box. You've got a clear view above enemy shields. You can see over palisades. You can shout snarky taunts without worrying about someone swinging a sword at your knees. The logic was straightforward. The desert was flat. The camel was tall, and any extra advantage, especially if it involved raining arrows from above, was worth hauling a mini-building around for. And don't imagine this was all slapped together like a poorly assembled IKEA fortress. No, some of these howdahs were crafted with reinforced wood, padded interiors, and even slits for arrows. The more ornate ones had cloth canopies to shield archers from the sun, because if you're going to shoot people, you might as well stay cool doing it. But it wasn't just about offense. These camel castles also served defensive purposes. In border patrols or scouting missions, they acted like mobile lookout towers. A single camel with a tall lookout box could provide early warning across vast desert expanses. And given a camel's stubbornness, it probably refused to move even when you wanted it to, which accidentally made them excellent stationary guards. Now here's the weird part, and it's delightfully medieval. Some accounts suggest that enemy horses were actually spooked by camels. The smell, the sound, the lanky silhouette at night, it messed with the horse's instincts. So imagine this strategic chaos. Not only are you getting peppered with arrows from a mobile siege perch, but your horse has decided it's not emotionally stable enough for this battle and tries to exit stage left. And all of this raises a delightful scholarly debate. Some historians argue the whole castle on a camel thing was more symbolic than practical, part intimidation, part propaganda. They say it looked impressive, but in real combat the towers were clunky and top-heavy. Others defend their utility, pointing to siege descriptions and trade routes where these portable towers offered genuine tactical use. So, who's right? Hard to say from here as you squint into the glowing horizon. The camel turns its wooden structure groaning softly, like an old rocking chair. You imagine the person riding inside, likely a low-ranking soldier with strong legs, dusty feet, and absolutely no fear of motion sickness. The moonlight catches on the edges of the structure, and for a moment, it really does look like a castle. Not the towering stone kind, but something humbler, lighter, more imaginative. A fortress that moves with the sand and vanishes with the wind. You blink, the camel spits 3 light jokes before we rest your brain for the night. Camels, the only medieval beast that came with real estate. Nice castle. Where'd you park it? Oh, just behind the third dune. No trebuchets. No problem. Just add one hump and a balcony. Morning arrives, and with it, the sun climbs like it's late for something important. The desert lights up in waves of gold, and the heat begins its slow, confident creep. You're blinking against the brightness when a sudden gust of sand makes you sneeze, directly into your own sleeve. Graceful. Ahead, a whole line of camels sways in the light, like ships in a lazy sea. But not just camels. War camels, each carrying what appears to be a wooden shack on its back. Some are simple box-like. Others, multi-tiered platforms with flags-painted panels and storage compartments that look suspiciously like medieval glove boxes. You're about to witness one of history's most unexpected inventions, the mobile stages of medieval desert warfare. See, the desert doesn't have a lot of high ground. It's not like you can just set up camp on a cliff and wait for your enemies to tire themselves out climbing. So, soldiers in the medieval Middle East had to get creative. Why not build your own high ground and put it on something that walks? Enter the Camel Tower Parade in some armies, particularly within the Fatimid Caliphate, or later Mamluk units. Military architects designed lightweight fortifications that could be assembled atop a camel. It wasn't just about shooting from up high, though that was fun. It was about visibility. Commanders needed to see where the enemy was going direct formations and look cool while doing it. And nothing says authority like yelling orders from a walking gazebo. You're told to climb one of the towers. Don't worry, it's been properly fastened with thick leather straps and knots that look mostly trustworthy. You cling to a wooden rail, then hoist yourself up through the trapdoor. Inside, it smells of cedar sweat and military ambition. There's room for 2 archers, a small storage crate, and what you think might be a water skin or possibly a pickled date pouch. Hard to tell. Once the camel starts moving, everything sways like you're balancing on a canoe full of squirrels. But strangely, it works. The motion smooths out, and the camel-blessed creature of momentum glides across the dunes with slow determination. From up here, you can see the entire formation. Some camels carry archers, others drummers, and at least one camel has what looks like a scribe holding a ledger. He's either taking notes on enemy movement or writing camel poetry. Could go either way. Now you might ask, wouldn't it be better to use horses? Faster, sleeker, more familiar. Yes and no. Horses, while noble and speedy, don't like heat, or sand, or going without water for 3 days. Camels, on the other hand, thrive in those exact conditions. They were the perfect platform, enduring balanced and tall enough to make a statement. Even better, camels remember insults. Seriously, if someone mistreats a camel, it can hold a grudge for years. That's not battle strategy, just a fun medieval HR note. But of course, no good idea goes unmocked. Some satirical writers of the time described camel-mounted towers as theater on legs, a jab at how dramatic and impractical they appeared. Still, those same critics quietly admitted in the right moment, in the right battle, they worked. Especially in large-scale parades, before sieges, or ceremonial marches through cities, these mobile towers became symbols of prestige. People threw flowers. Kids pointed. One camel even got knighted, though sources are vague on whether the sword ceremony was successful. Here's a delightfully bizarre historical side note. In one 12th century military journal, there's a sketch of a camel-mounted platform with curtains. Yes, actual stage curtains, supposedly to shield archers from sun or to create a surprise opening. Did it work? Unclear. But somewhere in medieval Syria, someone thought, what if my arrow came with a dramatic reveal? And once again, you find yourself wrapped in that quiet twilight zone between awe and absurdity. Up here, the wind whistles around your wooden tower, and your camel snorts with boredom. Somewhere behind you, a soldier is composing a speech he'll never deliver because sand got in his throat. Still, you understand the appeal. When flat terrain gives no vantage and the heat saps every clever plan, the only answer is to build something taller and put it on the one creature that doesn't care how heavy it is. Tonight's trivia break, camel-themed. Camels can close their nostrils to keep out sand. Try doing that next time you sneeze. Medieval camels were basically tactical SUVs, high clearance storage space, and bad mileage when moody. Some riders decorated their towers with bells, not for alerts, but because it sounded fancy. The afternoon sun hangs above you like a judgmental pancake, round, relentless, and slightly burnt. You're sweating through your tunic, which now smells like old parchment and regret. But you've got work to do, because today, you are a tax inspector. Yes, congratulations. Your medieval dream career has finally arrived. You sit at the edge of a dusty checkpoint on the Silk Road, scroll in hand, trying to look important. A caravan approaches in the distance, and you can already hear the faint, familiar grunt of camels, dozens of them. But these aren't ordinary camels. These are trade camels with castles, and they've got cargo to declare. One by one they arrive. Each camel is outfitted with a wooden structure on its back. Some simple, like a covered wagon. Others more elaborate, with painted panels and storage compartments arranged like a medieval walk-in closet. You peer into one bolts of Persian silk jars of dried figs, vials of lapis pigment, and something that smells suspiciously like roasted onions and goat oil. Another tower holds medicinal herbs and books, because nothing says economy like transporting your entire library on a camel with an attitude problem. You begin your inspections, and here's where things get fascinating. These camel-borne towers weren't just military. They were economic ecosystems. Entire merchant families traveled with these mobile structures, converting camelbacks into miniature shops, tax shelters, literally, and even temporary living quarters. On longer journeys, the towers were fitted with sleeping platforms, hide walls for insulation, and even fold-out awnings for shade. Think of it as the medieval RV, but taller and with more spitting. You climb up one to double-check the cargo. Inside, a young scribe is copying a sales ledger while reclining against a bale of cinnamon bark. He offers you tea, brewed from water, boiled over a portable charcoal stove, yes on the camel. You politely decline because you've seen the color of that water. As you tick off a box marked luxury goods, the camel shifts its weight and lets out a low groaning sound. Not from the load, from existential boredom. The same noise you made when someone handed you 17 pages of shipping receipts. Historically, these mobile structures help traders keep goods secure and organized. Instead of stopping to unpack everything at every checkpoint, merchants could point to a specific labeled crate, Dai's top, left behind the spices next to Cousin Hamid. Efficiency, camel style. And because these camel towers were visible from far off, they also served as status symbols. A merchant with a painted tower and ornamental hangings meant business, literally. In markets from Baghdad to Samarkand, the size and decoration of your camel fortress told everyone just how serious your silk game was. Now, here's your academic puzzle of the night. Were these structures purely practical, or were they performative? Were traders building taller towers to maximize cargo, or just to impress competitors? Historians are split. Some believe the towers evolved out of logistical necessity when one camel can carry 600 pounds. But you also want it to sleep shade and store your tapestries, you get creative. Others argue that in the ultra-competitive medieval trade, network's visibility was power. A fancy tower wasn't just a tent on legs. It was an advertisement, a portable billboard, and a "do not rob me, I'm respectable" sign all at once. Honestly, it was probably both. After all, you can't be the Frank Ocean of the frankincense trade without some flair. Meanwhile, your ledger is filling up fast. The lead merchant assures you that all taxes have been prepaid. You raise an eyebrow. He hands you a pouch of dates. Not a bribe, he insists. Just hospitality. The camel next to him makes direct eye contact with you and burps. Message received. And here's where things get delightfully niche. In some regions, certain types of trade camels were exempt from full taxation if they carried religious texts or official court correspondence, which means that some clever traders stuffed scrolls between crates of cinnamon and called it legal protection. You can't say it didn't work. At least 3 records mention tax officers letting things slide because the camels carried wisdom. So, as the sun tilts toward evening and you wave the caravan through, you reflect on the power of a moving tower. Not a siege weapon, not a fortress, but a roaming business complete with a second-floor awnings and a camel named Dignity. And for tonight's set of sleepy silliness, medieval merchants, the original van lifers, but with more sunstroke. Why yes, my storefront does have hooves. You haven't filed taxes until you've done it from a saddle in 110-degree heat. Nightfall sweeps across the desert like a velvet curtain, deep blue and star-stitched. But you're not sleeping yet, not under open sky anyway, because tonight your bed is inside a camel castle. That's right. You've been invited to spend the night in one of the portable towers mounted atop a camel's back. And let me tell you, it's not what you expected. You climb the side using a braided rope ladder, half expecting it to snap under your weight, but the camel doesn't flinch. This one's clearly used to overnight guests. Inside, it's surprisingly cozy. The walls are canvas-lined to block the wind, the floor padded with thick woolen rugs, and there's a low shelf stacked with scrolls, dried fruit, and something labeled emergency chess. You settle into a corner knees, tucked, wondering how in the world this became your life. Welcome to the humpback caravanserai, where the camel doubles as a mobile motel. In the heart of medieval trade, network's rest stops were rare. You might travel days before stumbling upon a real caravanserai, a fortified inn with food, water, and other humans. So what did travelers do in the meantime? They brought their own shelter, literally on the backs of their beasts. Certain camel towers were designed not just for defense or trade, but for living. These weren't the tall, boxy shooting platforms used in war. These were lower, sturdier, designed with sleeping hammocks, water pouches hanging from pegs, even hooks for lanterns. Think of it as a 2-humped Airbnb, no cleaning fee required. Your host tonight is a Sogdian trader who proudly tells you his camel tower was custom built in Bukhara. He calls it the roaming room. It's been across 5 empires, seen 10 sandstorms, and once hosted a minor poet who wept quietly for 3 nights straight. You sip some cardamom tea offered in a chipped bronze cup and listen as the camel exhales just below you, a warm puff through the floorboards. There's something deeply peaceful about the way the tower sways just slightly in the wind. It's like being in a treehouse, if the tree could walk and occasionally chew things. Now here's the oddly delightful historical twist. Some of these camel-mounted shelters were shared between families. During long expeditions each night, different people would take turns using the tower as a sleeping nook, while others slept in tents on the ground. One source even mentions a rotation chart scratched onto a piece of bone. Medieval times, where scheduling still ruled your life, and these mobile rooms weren't just for sleep. In drier seasons, they doubled as writing spaces. Travelers documented dreams, wrote letters to faraway loved ones, or composed quiet reflections on the stars. It's oddly poetic riding through a brutal desert by day, then retreating into your own wooden capsule to write about how much your knees hurt. Some had tiny openings in the roof to let in moonlight. Others were painted inside with prayers or lucky symbols, symbols meant to protect travelers from sandstorms, theft, or the more philosophical threat of homesickness. Academic debate time were these overnight camel towers a widespread practice or a luxury limited to elite traders. The sources are mixed. Some historians argue they were rare, expensive contraptions used only by wealthy merchants or dignitaries who couldn't be bothered with tents. Others say they were a practical adaptation, anyone with enough war, but there's no denying that a well-equipped camel with a rest pod made the journey safer and less exhausting. After all, setting up and breaking down a camp every night is a pain, especially when you're racing a sandstorm and your torch keeps going out. You stretch your arms, yawn, and think maybe the best part of this castle isn't the roof over your head. It's the quiet. Up here, you're just far enough from the campfires, the murmurs, the clanking of pots. It's just you, the stars, and the strange, steady breath of a creature that's been walking this path for thousands of years. Let's wrap this part with 3 soft chuckles. The camel doesn't snore, but it sighs like a tired librarian. Who needs 5-star hotels when you have 4 legs and a loft? Medieval room service, you get what the camel's already carrying. Dawn peeks through the fabric walls of your camel tower like a nosy neighbor with a torch. You wake slowly, blinking at the ceiling, a slatted roof stitched with soft wear and faint sun patterns. Beneath you, the camel is still chewing something you hope isn't part of your luggage. Outside the camp stirs with the quiet, determined movements of people who've done this before, folding cloth, cinching ropes, making tea in mugs that have seen better centuries. But this morning is different. You've been summoned to a royal reception, not one held in a golden palace with polished marble floors, but on the edge of the desert, where a high-ranking emir is about to meet envoys from a distant kingdom. And as you've come to expect by now, the star of the show isn't a human, it's a camel, a royal one, dressed better than you. As the camp prepares, you're led toward a cleared space flanked by banners and palm shade. In the middle stands a tall, proud camel with glossy fur ceremonial harnesses embroidered in gold thread and a castle-shaped pavilion mounted squarely on its back. Draped in crimson fabric and fluttering with silver tassels, it looks more like a parade float than a beast of burden. This isn't a camel. This is a diplomatic statement on 4 legs. Welcome to the world of diplomatic camel, the diplomatic camel. In many medieval courts across the Islamic world, especially under the Abbasid Caliphate and in North Africa, the arrival of a decorated camel signaled more than a delivery. It meant recognition. respect, theater. These camels were not only gifts, but emissaries decked out in silks, perfumed, sometimes painted, yes painted, and often accompanied by musicians or poets. Today's camel, you're told, was raised on royal grounds, trained to walk only during ceremonial processions, and taught to respond to certain flute notes. You wonder briefly if you too can be trained to follow a flute. And when the foreign delegation arrives, the camel performs beautifully, striding forward, bowing slightly, with some coaxing and kneeling gracefully, as if it understands the geopolitical stakes at play. From the tower, strapped to its back, a page steps out, carrying a velvet-wrapped scroll. The crowd murmurs. The scroll is opened, read aloud, and met with applause. An alliance reaffirmed. And somewhere behind you, someone cries because the camel winked at them. Historically, such ceremonies weren't uncommon. Camels, especially the rare white ones, were gifted to emperors, sultans, and popes. Their towers served as mobile gift boxes filled with perfumes, precious stones, fine cloth, or even rare birds. They were the medieval version of showing up with a luxury gift basket, but taller and more majestic. One particularly famous account describes a caravan sent by a Mamluk sultan to the court of the Byzantine emperor, with camels wearing embroidered coats, carrying towers that played music via hidden bells as they walked. Diplomacy met pageantry in the most medieval way possible by turning animals into floating palaces. And yes, there was a protocol. You couldn't just strap any old shack onto a camel and call it a diplomatic vehicle. The towers were designed with symmetrical sides, open panels, to show the lavish interior, and banners indicating the ruler's identity. Some even had tiny balconies where pages could wave like royal mascots. There's even a delightful debate among historians about whether camels had rank, not just importance, but actual titles. In a few Persian records, camels used for diplomacy are listed by name alongside phrases like noble bearer or emissary mount. Which begs the question, did they get retirement benefits? Maybe a nice paddock with dates and no stairs? You squint up at the tower again. Now the party's moved on to poetry. A court bard is reciting an ode dedicated not to the emir, but to the camel itself, praising its dignity, its strength, and its ability to carry the weight of politics and peacock feathers simultaneously. And strangely, it kind of works. You're not sure what's more surreal, that everyone's clapping, or that you're clapping too. The sun rises higher, casting a halo over the creature's ornate headgear. And for a fleeting moment, it feels right. That something so stubborn, shaggy, and famously flatulent could be at the center of diplomacy, a reminder that power doesn't always ride in chariots. Sometimes it chews cud and walks at a dignified pace. 3 gentle chuckles for our royal beast. The camel bowed more gracefully than the ambassador. Let's be honest, camel diplomacy, because nothing says peace treaty like 4 legs and a canopy. Some kings had crowns. Others rode camels that sparkled. Who really won? It's high noon in a crowded desert outpost, and you've found shade under what appears to be a tapestry held up by sheer force of optimism. Around you, there's noise traders, haggling drums thumping, and someone loudly insisting that their camel is twice as fast and 3 times as charming as any other in town. But today's entertainment isn't a marketplace duel or a fire eater. It's a military showcase, an open demonstration of new armor tactics and transport beasts. And smack in the middle of this bustling field are 2 distinct camps, separated by a rickety fence, and a lifetime of mutual judgment. Horses on one side, camels on the other. You stand in no man's land, watching it unfold like a tense medieval fashion show. On the horse side, knights polish, chainmail, tighten saddle straps, and toss their manes dramatically, some of the knights more so than the horses. The animals are sleek fast, and it must be said, smug. Their hooves tap the ground like they're waiting to be announced. On the other side, camels, tall, aloof. Their eyes say, "We saw empires rise and fall while you were still learning to trot." And strapped to their backs are not simple saddles, but towering wooden platforms, complete with flags, compartments, and tiny battlements. It's like watching someone compare sports cars to armored food trucks. The crowd is here to witness a test run, which is better in desert warfare, traditional cavalry, or the castle-carrying camel. The first trial begins speed. A knight in polished silver charges forward on a powerful steed, slicing the air like a poem about aggression. Cheers erupt. Then a camel lumbers forward, slowly, deliberately. The crowd chuckles until it becomes clear the camel isn't racing. It's carrying 3 people, 2 crates, and a small cooking fire. And it's not even tired. Next, trial stability in uneven terrain. The knights sprint through dunes, their horses stumbling slightly in the looser sand. Then comes the camel, its wide feet barely sinking head high, practically rolling its eyes at gravity. One of the riders waves from the tower like royalty on a parade route. Finally, intimidation. The knight strikes a bold pose, sword-raised steed rearing back dramatically. Applause. Then the camel team approaches. With synchronized effort, the riders rise inside the tower and launch a volley of blunt training arrows at targets across the field. One camel even turns sideways, so its tower faces the crowd fully like a model finding the light. A dog barks. A small child gasps. A horse snorts and takes 2 cautious steps backward. And there it is. What no one wants to say. Aloud. The horses are kind of jealous. You overhear one stable master whisper to another, "It's not fair they've got built-in storage." To which the other replies, "And they don't panic at butterflies." Fair point. This whole spectacle might seem absurd, but it reflects a real tension from the period. In regions where desert warfare dominated, camels offered practical advantages, height endurance, and resistance to heat. Horses were magnificent in short bursts on firm ground, but they needed more water, more rest, and far more convincing. Still, among Western crusaders and European armies, the idea of mounting towers on camels sounded ridiculous. They mocked it in letters and scrolls, until of course they had to fight against it. And then suddenly camels weren't silly anymore. They were strategic, intimidating, and infuriatingly unbothered. Which brings us to the academic whisper of this segment, where medieval Western armies wrong to dismiss camels as inferior cavalry. Some scholars argue yes. They believe this bias slowed adaptation and made European forces vulnerable in desert conflicts. Others say no, it was simply a matter of terrain familiarity and cultural preference. After all, it's hard to redesign your tactics around an animal you've only seen in imported paintings. As the sun begins to slide toward the west, the demonstration wraps up. The knights receive polite applause. The camels, a standing ovation. Okay, not standing, because people are tired and it's hot, but the enthusiasm is clear. Somewhere, a knight sulks behind a tent. Somewhere else, a camel slowly munches a decorative banner. Tonight's chuckles before we drift off. Camels don't race. They glide with indifference. Horse armor is shiny. Camel towers come with cup holders. You haven't felt judged until a camel looks at your warhorse like it's a mall pony. The sky turns a burnt orange, like someone tried to cook a peach and forgot it on the fire. You're on the outskirts of a border town now, where the sand gets coarse, the wind picks up attitude, and the conversations are mostly sideways glances and murmurs. It's the perfect place for things to go missing, especially people, and that's why you're here. Or more accurately, that's why your new companion is here. Standing beside you is not a typical camel. This one doesn't carry goods or a tower. It carries intent. Heavy, quiet intent. Its harness is minimal. No pavilion, no flags, just reinforced leather, a small pack, and a rolled-up tent. This is a tracking camel, and tonight you're following a trail. The local guard gestures vaguely toward the hills. A scout went missing 3 nights ago. No footprints, no witnesses, just an abandoned water skin and a worry hanging in the air. So naturally, they sent for the best this camel and its silent, sharp-eyed handler. You weren't exactly invited, but you're here, and someone handed you a lantern. So now you're part of the mission. As you walk beside the camel, you notice its behavior. Nose close to the ground. Eyes scanning like it's reading the wind. Every few steps it stops, shifts its weight, then resumes. It's not random, it's methodical, almost calculating. And here's where medieval ingenuity comes in. Camels weren't just transport. In parts of the Middle East and North Africa, camels were trained to track. While dogs were the go-to trackers in Europe, desert cultures adapted their most reliable animal to do the same job in places where dogs simply wouldn't survive. With their keen sense of smell and ability to detect disturbances in sand or scent trails in arid air, camels became unlikely bloodhounds. Slow, deliberate, and annoyingly effective. You follow the group up a ridge. The wind kicks up and your lantern flutters. The camel doesn't blink. It stops, turns slightly, then begins moving again off the path toward a narrow canyon. The handler whispers something in Arabic you don't catch, but the tone is clear. He trusts the camel more than any of us. And here's the oddity of the night. Some tracking camels were trained to recognize specific people by scent. Not just clothes or leftover objects, but actual body scent. There are medieval documents that describe camels refusing food or kneeling when they detected the scent of a familiar but missing person. Creepy a little, impressive absolutely. You descend into the canyon. The air cools and the light shifts to a deep twilight blue. The camel stops again, then lowers itself slowly. The handler leans down, touches the sand, and finds something. A buckle. Tarnished. Still warm from the sun. It's a lead. There's a moment of silence, the kind where every breath feels heavy and every shadow is suspicious. Then with a grunt, the camel rises. It's not tired. It's ready to continue. And so are you, whether you like it or not. Here's your scholarly question to chew on as the stars come out. Why didn't more cultures train camels as trackers? One theory: temperament. Camels are notoriously moody. Training them required patience, consistency, and probably more bribes than any army budget could allow. Another view: cultural adaptation regions with forests, mountains, or cooler climates simply didn't need to make camels work that hard. Horses and dogs were more suited to their terrain, but in the sand-choked silence of the medieval desert, a well-trained camel wasn't just a tracker. It was a lifeline, a way to find the lost. a whisperer of trails. By the time you return to camp, the moon is high. The missing scout has not yet been found, but you're closer. And the camel? It's chewing thoughtfully on a dry twig, looking like it knows things it's not ready to share. Tonight's final smiles. Before sleep, camels don't fetch. They just judge your inability to find things yourself. Camel tracking part science, part magic, all attitude. You haven't known passive aggression until a camel ignores your directions, but still finds the path better than you ever could. The stars have barely faded when you're roused by the sound of wood creaking and someone yelling, "Watch the tail," a phrase that by now could mean either the camel's backside or the rear panel of a mobile tower. It's morning again, early, sharp, and sand-flavored. You rub your eyes and realize you've woken in the middle of an active loading operation. Because today is not about war or diplomacy or mysterious disappearances. Today is about logistics. You're embedded with a supply unit. That sounds boring until you see the camels. These aren't ordinary transport camels. These are modular camels, each fitted with adjustable wooden frames that allow for towers, crates, water barrels, tool racks, and even a fold-out canopy labeled shade, optional, hope not. And you're here to witness what might be the most impressive sight in medieval mobility, the support fleet on legs. Camels in many medieval armies weren't just beasts of burden. They were infrastructure. One camel carries medical herbs and rolls of linen bandages. Another hauls firewood stacked like puzzle pieces. Two more are strapped with enormous clay pots of water sealed with wax and dangling steady from a cross frame that looks like a medieval jungle gym. And then there's the mobile kitchen. You didn't know that was a thing, but it is. A low, wide platform strapped to a particularly disgruntled camel holds cooking pots, dried pulses, dates, and a flat slab of metal used for baking bread over coals. The cook walks beside it, already shouting about the flour rations. You follow a clerk, taking inventory. He points out one camel that's been designated as the tent carrier. Its load is covered with tightly packed canvas stakes, mallets, and ropes. You imagine someone pitching an entire command tent from a single swaying creature, and wonder how often those ropes came undone mid-march. But the most curious sight, a camel that carries what looks like a miniature writing room. It's true. A simple wooden frame covered in cloth and rugs with a hinged window that opens just enough to let in light and gossip. Inside sits a scribe with ink-stained fingers, writing down troop numbers, ration notes, and occasional poems. Because why not? Every army needs poetry. This is where the medieval military machine shines in unexpected ways. While horses were faster and donkeys cheaper, camels were the only ones who could carry everything at once and keep going. They could survive days without water-resist sandstorms and give soldiers the literal backbone of a moving camp. Now here's where the side note gets fun. Some camels had names based on their job. One Persian record lists a camel called the Spoon Vault, another called Sir Sleep-a-Lot, who allegedly refused to stand up unless food was promised. In some documents, logistics camels are even described as being rotated out for emotional fatigue. Yes, medieval burnout, not just for humans. You watch as one camel kneels to be loaded with spare boots and helmets. The handler whispers something to it, likely encouragement, possibly threats, and pats its flank. The camel responds with a noise best described as ancient disapproval, which brings us to the question of the hour: were camels better suited to logistics than any other animal in the medieval world? Many scholars argue yes. Their ability to adapt to harsh environments, carry up to 600 pounds, and still keep walking made them ideal. Others say the answer depends on the terrain and type of campaign. But few deny this. Without camels, much of medieval warfare and long-distance travel would have crumbled under its own weight. And that's the part history classes rarely emphasize. We hear about knights' banners, epic speeches, but no one talks about the camel hauling the extra swords or the one carrying a noble's breakfast. As the sun rises higher, the caravan begins to move. The towers sway, the crates rattle, and somewhere behind you, a rooster crows from inside a box. Apparently, it's being transported too. You're walking beside a mobile civilization, tents, food gear Inc., and someone snoring in a half-built observation post. All of it balanced on haughty, powerful, grumbling creatures that have absolutely zero time for your admiration. Here's your triple chuckle for the day. One camel carried the food, the tent, and the cook's ego. It complained only about the ego. Logistics Camels proof that medieval supply chains walked on four legs and never smiled. You don't know multitasking until you've baked flatbread while trotting across sand on a moving oven. It's late evening now, the kind where shadows stretch too far, and everyone seems a little suspicious of the sunset. You've been wandering the outer edges of a desert town that doesn't show up on most maps, which is always a great sign historically speaking. The smell in the air is a mix of spiced meat, charcoal smoke, and questionable decisions. And that's when you find it, tucked between two leaning walls and a goat that may or may not be on patrol. You stumble upon what might be the strangest market stall in the entire medieval world. No colorful fabrics, no figs, just camels. And not just any camels for hire, each fitted with full wooden towers already strapped on. You squint. Is this a tactical supply depot, a traveling circus, a prank? The sign above reads, Camel Towers rented daily. No questions asked. Oh no, you've found the medieval black market for castle camels. A wiry man in a faded robe greets you with a toothy grin. Special today, light tower, 2 archer capacity reinforced corners. Stains not included. Behind him, a grumpy camel stands in full battle gear, its wooden frame slightly crooked, as if it's been through things no one should ask about. You look around. This isn't just a back alley rental booth. It's a full operation. Some camels come with pre-installed supplies, ropes, blankets, even oil flasks. Others offer premium options like built-in shade cloths or bonus viewing hatches. There's even a laminated board, well-waxed parchment comparing tower types, single-tier double-deck, and elevated insult platforms. You don't ask. The handler offers you a deal. You look like a commander. Just for tonight, take the storm perch. She's got a balcony. You decline, but now you're invested. Historically, while this specific stall may be a dramatization, though who's to say there were indeed informal rental systems in some medieval trade hubs. Camels could be borrowed or leased sometimes, with full equipment, sometimes bareback for everything from transporting goods to quick short-distance military displays. In regions where armies didn't maintain their own camel corps, they often contracted from locals. A nobleman preparing for a siege might temporarily outfit a dozen camels with towers, not for long-term campaigns, but for intimidation. And just like that, the mobile castle business boomed. Naturally, this opened doors for opportunists. Some folks began crafting ready-to-strap towers like medieval flat packs. Others kept camels pre-trained to kneel rise and tolerate the weight of questionable architecture. And in cities that sat between empires, a mini industry emerged: castle camel rentals. What could possibly go wrong? Well, plenty. Historical records mention towers collapsing mid-march, camels refusing to kneel without payment, no really. And one instance where a camel hired out for scouting duty wandered into a wedding and stole a roast chicken. It happens. But perhaps the most bizarre tale of all, a sultan's aide reportedly hired 2 camels for a border patrol, returned 3 days later with 1 camel, no tower, and a very vague explanation involving a sudden gust of loyalty. So, here's your academic riddle for tonight. Were these informal camel hires viewed as legitimate military tools or embarrassing shortcuts? Some historians argue they filled a necessary role, especially for minor lords without standing armies. Others see them as laughable gimmicks, flashy, fragile, and easy to topple. But everyone agrees on one thing: if the camel refused to cooperate, there was absolutely nothing you could do. You take a few steps back from the stall as another buyer arrives, inspecting a tower with a suspicious dent and what looks like bite marks. The seller assures him its historic character. The camel sighs. As the stars blink into place above you, the market begins to quiet. Deals are made. Camels are led off towers, swaying like slow ships. Somewhere in the distance, a small child yells, "My fort has legs," and you know exactly what they mean. Tonight's whispered laughs: rent a camel, because sometimes owning your own siege beast is just too much. She comes fully furnished balcony hatch and a strong dislike of nobles. Medieval Airbnb, bring your own water leave with a tower on your back. Morning again, this time bright and loud, the kind of morning where the sun's already halfway up before the town remembers it has chores to do. You're in the heart of a medieval fairground now. The air smells like roasted chestnuts, horses sweat, and unearned confidence. Jugglers toss flaming sticks. Merchants shout about socks you didn't ask for. And somewhere near the maypole, someone is dramatically falling off stilts. But wait, over near the puppet tent, something unexpected catches your eye. It's a camel, wearing a tiny flag, standing very still. Then all at once, it moves. Swift, steady, and oddly graceful for a creature that usually walks like it's recovering from leg day. On its back is not a trader's tower or a war platform. It's something very different: an arena. Welcome to the Camelback Tournament, where knights and archers ride into mock battle, not on horses, but on the tall, swaying backs of fully decked out camels. It's part of the town's annual games, half festivity, half unofficial training ground, and fully chaotic. There are cheers, betting slips, and a strong smell of overcooked onions. This event isn't just popular, it's prestigious. The winner is dubbed Desert Champion for the year and receives a silver ring, a roasted goat, and bragging rights that echo for months. You're handed a scorecard and a stick of mystery meat. Welcome to the stands. Out in the main ring, the first challenge begins: archery on camelback. Competitors line up atop camels, wearing light wooden platforms, more like stage decks than full towers. As drums roll, each archer releases a volley, while their camel strides in a large circle. It's a test of balance timing and not getting launched into the date stalls by a sudden turn. One contestant hits all 5 targets. Another accidentally shoots their own water skin. A third pulls off a perfect bullseye and throws their arms up in celebration, only to fall backwards into the sand. The camel, unbothered, keeps walking, Next comes the obstacle course. Picture weaving through hay bales, ducking under hanging cloth strips, and knocking over shields, all while trying not to drop your spear or your dignity. One camel refuses to participate until offered a slice of melon. Another finishes the course backwards, but is awarded points for style. Then the final event, the duel. Two riders, two camels, one long pole each. Not quite jousting, more like slow-motion fencing on stilts. They prod, they lunge, and occasionally they just circle each other while trading insults in 6 languages. One rider wins by default, when the other is gently but decisively pushed off by his own camel's tail. And it's here that you realize this isn't just sport. It's a display of skill building. In certain desert regions, especially along military outposts or during seasonal festivals, these events served multiple purposes: community gathering, training drills, and subtle recruitment tests. Young archers learned how to shoot from motion. Scouts got used to navigating awkward heights. And handlers figured out which camels would obey commands under pressure and which would politely not. Interestingly, one medieval scribe wrote of such games in Persia, describing a knightly school upon the hump, where camel-mounted exercises were used to prepare soldiers for real battlefield conditions. The tournaments became both entertainment and examination. Now comes your scholarly curiosity for the day. Were these events limited to certain regions or widespread among camel-using cultures? Some argue they were localized to places with strong military traditions and stable communities where camels were deeply integrated into daily life. Others believe traveling troops helped spread the idea, mixing fun and function as they wandered from town to town. Either way, they left behind more than just trampled tents and excited children. They left trained warriors who knew how to balance on a moving tower. The sun's high now. The crowd begins to disperse. You fold your scorecard and wave goodbye to the tournament champion, who's now being hoisted onto someone's shoulders while their camel chews a garland of wilted flowers. You take one last look at the empty ring. The sand's been kicked up into loops and spirals, like the tournament left behind its own language, one written in hooves and splinters and good intentions. The sun dips low, painting the sky with streaks of lavender and smoke. You're further out now, beyond the towns, the tents, and even the edge of believable stories. You walk beside a small caravan winding through quiet hills. The pace is slow, but the conversation is lively. Because tonight, the stories are different. Tonight, the towers on camelbacks aren't just practical or ceremonial. They're alive, or at least that's what everyone around the fire seems to believe. You sit cross-legged, nibbling on spiced lentils, listening to an old storyteller recount the legend of the walking fortress of Kharezm, a massive structure said to be carried by not one, but 12 camels, bound together by enchanted leather straps. This fortress roamed the deserts by moonlight, defending its owner from assassins' curses and bad weather forecasts. It had trapdoors, hidden staircases, and once, according to a wide-eyed boy, barked like a dog. Someone else chimes in. My uncle swore he saw a moving castle last summer. Came over the dunes at dusk, vanished by dawn. Whole thing smelled like cinnamon and bad omens. You try not to laugh, but then again, they're oddly convincing. Because here's the thing. The myth of the walking camel castle isn't just one tale, it's many. Across Central Asia, North Africa, and parts of the Middle East, travelers and poets alike described massive mobile towers that seemed more beast than structure. Some believed these castles were blessed tools of wandering saints or reclusive sorcerers. Others said they were cursed doomed to roam forever, never able to settle because they once denied a guest water. It sounds absurd until you consider the facts. Camels did carry towers. Some were ornately decorated, others covered in flowing fabric that blurred their outline at night. A caravan of well-equipped camels, viewed from a distance, could genuinely resemble something otherworldly, especially under a full moon, especially if you hadn't had dinner. And in the silence of the desert, things take on their own life. A wooden tower creaks like a voice. A gust of wind whistles through arrow slits. A lantern sways and casts shifting shadows that dance like spirits. It's not hard to see how stories grew legs, 4 legs, and started walking. One fragment from a 13th century poem describes a house on high shoulders, gliding past dunes, never leaving tracks. Another mentions a beast of rooms, too large to feed, too silent to name. Scholars today argue over these verses. Were they symbolic, satirical, literal? Some say the walking fortress was a metaphor for power, without roots, the idea of a kingdom that moved but left no legacy. Others believe it's based on real military experiments, large siege towers broken into parts, carried by multiple camels, then reassembled in battle zones. Wild maybe, impossible less so. And so, as the fire burns low and the stars spread wider, you lie back and imagine it. A line of camels, their steps perfectly synchronized. A tower above glowing faintly. Inside, a scholar, a guard, a scribe, asleep at his desk. The entire structure moving across sand like a dream half remembered. It's terrifying and oddly peaceful. The storyteller finishes with a sigh. Some say the last fortress still wanders, he says, waiting for someone to climb aboard and steer it home. You shiver a little. From the wind, of course. Here's your soft, scholarly nudge for tonight. What role did folklore play in shaping real military practice? Did these tales inspire builders to make more dramatic towers? Did commanders lean into the myth, knowing fear travels faster than facts? Or did soldiers simply enjoy the stories as comfort proof that somewhere out there was a fortress that never needed stone, only trust in its legs? No one knows, but the stories kept walking. Your 3 bedtime giggles. One camel castle reportedly had haunted curtains. Turns out, it was just a draft and a very dramatic parrot. Do you believe in walking fortresses? Only after the 2nd cup of wine. The best part about mythical towers: no maintenance fees and unlimited miles. The stars are still out when the first bell rings. A soft chime followed by another, then another, echoing across the early desert, like the world itself is waking up very carefully. You're part of a procession now, one that stretches as far as the eye can see. Dozens of figures, wrapped in wool and linen, faces half covered against the chill, moving in reverent silence. This isn't a trade caravan, and it's not a military march. This is a pilgrimage, and the camels, they're not here to intimidate or transport bolts of silk. Tonight, they carry faith. You're traveling with a group bound for Mecca, deep into the heart of the Islamic world. The year doesn't matter, because this story happened many times in many centuries. The people walking beside you are scholars, merchants, midwives, cooks, widows, students, and camels. Camels with water barrels. Camels with wooden crates of supplies. Camels with towers that aren't for defense, but for reflection. One tower in particular catches your attention. It's low and wide, draped in green fabric, with verses of poetry sewn along the edge in tight practice script. Inside, you spot a man hunched over a notebook, writing by candlelight. He's a physician, you're told, also a theologian, and sometimes, apparently a bard. You blink. He smiles. There's no better place to write than on the move, he says. It's quiet, save for the soft shuffle of sand and the occasional disgruntled snort. A camel nearby wears a small wooden shelf with jars of herbs. Another has a rotating lantern rigged above its shoulders, slowly spinning in rhythm with its gait. Someone whispers that one belongs to the calligrapher. Of course it does. You begin to see the pattern. Each tower is a world unto itself. One is a traveling kitchen, brewing spiced tea for the elders. One holds scrolls and ink used for documenting the route. Another appears to be a mobile prayer niche with carefully placed carpets, a compass stone, and a small copper bell that chimes with every step. And while many walk some rest within these towers, the elderly, the ill, the deeply meditative. One woman recites verses as her camel moves gently forward, her voice weaving through the air like morning smoke. This was no minor feat. Organizing a pilgrimage required meticulous planning. These camel-borne towers made the impossible journey survivable. In Ottoman records, there are entire sections detailing the logistics of spiritual travel, how camels were grouped towers assigned water rationed, and disputes settled over who got the camel with better shade. Even more fascinating, some camels had specific spiritual reputations. Not blessed exactly, but respected. That one carried the imam's grandmother, someone might say. Or this one never veered off course, not once. And if a tower remained upright through 3 sandstorms, it was never dismantled, only passed down. And now, the soft scholarly tension of this chapter. Were these camel towers part of spiritual symbolism, or simply utilitarian tools? Some historians argue they blurred the line between ritual and structure, where movement became meditation, and the tower itself a place of private connection to the divine. Others point out the basic facts you needed to eat, rest, and write things down. Sometimes a box on a camel is just a box on a camel, but standing here watching the glow of oil lamps sway gently from tower to tower, you wonder. Maybe belief and practicality were never separate to begin with. The desert wind picks up, and the towers shift in perfect unison. Dozens of them, each carrying the quiet heartbeat of someone's journey. The camels don't complain. They walk with a steadiness that suggests they've done this 100 times and could do it 100 more. And then from somewhere behind, a low melodic hum begins. A prayer, a song, a memory. It weaves through the line like a golden thread, connecting voices, towers, and footsteps into one long, breathing, purposeful path. Tonight's gentle grins before rest. One camel tower had both a prayer rug and a tea set, proof that faith and comfort go beautifully together. Medieval camel GPS. Just follow the one, humming the loudest, and never making a wrong turn. He wrote 200 verses of poetry on that tower. Was it about God mostly? Also about raisins. The sky is steel gray this morning, thick with heat that hasn't arrived yet. It's the kind of morning that feels like it's waiting to pounce. Dust clings to your sleeves, your hair, your breath, and in the distance, shimmering through the haze like a mirage that forgot how to be subtle, you see them. War camels. Not just any camels. These are the ones you've heard about in stories whispered by fireside, towering, disciplined, unbothered by chaos, and wearing armor that makes them look like they walked out of a military fever dream. You're with the army of Saladin. The camp is alive with quiet efficiency. Soldiers sharpen blades, adjust saddles, check inventory. But the real stars are lined up in formation, kneeling like battlements. Camels outfitted with tower structures so well built, they might as well have staircases and window boxes. Each tower has a name painted in elegant script: the Wind's Tooth, Mercy from Above, the Listening Post. These aren't vanity titles. These are strategic platforms, and today you'll see how they work. You've been assigned to one called the Third Eye, not because it's spiritual, though it might be, but because it's used as a mobile command post, offering a clear view over the battlefield. Its wooden structure is reinforced with iron bands, has slits for viewing maps, and even a tiny cabinet for ink chalk and calming herbs. You climb the side with more grace than expected and settle inside knees against the map table, heart pounding in tempo with the camel's breath. As the army begins to move, it's surprisingly silent. Saladin's forces valued mobility coordination and terrain advantage, and that's exactly what these camels offered. In regions where the ground was too loose for wheeled siege engines and too open for foot soldiers to find cover, the camel towers became moving fortresses able to redeploy, rapidly hold archer units, and even relay signals between distant units. You peer through the front slit. Scouts gallop ahead. The camel's handler taps its flank gently. It rises smooth and slow, lifting you into a new kind of height battlefield elevation by way of long eyelashes and stubborn knees. And here's the academic centerpiece of this ride. Saladin wasn't known for overwhelming brute force. He was known for adaptation, shifting tactics, psychological advantage, and fluid response. These camel towers were part of that. Some were used to provoke enemy archers drawing fire away from ground troops. Others served as high ground sniper nests, moving with the line but always above it. And the most specialized signal towers with flags, polished metal mirrors, and coded drum patterns to communicate over miles. There's a recorded instance during the campaign against Crusader forces where 3 camel-mounted towers were positioned at triangle points across a shallow valley. The enemy thought it was overkill. Until mid-battle, the camels shifted to reveal decoys, and the real assault came from behind. You sit back in your tower legs tucked in, watching this army work like a single mind. Camels kneel on command. Arrows are handed up in silence. One archer recites a verse softly while preparing his bow. Another shares dried apricots from a hidden pouch. Below, your camel makes a low, grumbling noise, something between a sigh and a warning. You pat the wooden rail in response. You don't speak camel, but you think that means hang tight. And now, the delightfully odd detail of the day. Some of Saladin's camels were given medals. Small metal pendants worn on their harnesses, not for bravery per se, but for service. One chronicler describes a camel named Miskin, meaning the humble, who carried a wounded officer through a sandstorm and refused to stop until it reached camp. Miskin apparently received a new saddle and a song written in his honor. So here's your gentle scholarly quandary. Were these camels treated as soldiers or just tools? The evidence leans both ways. In formal rosters, they're listed with numbers and value like equipment. But in poems, letters, and oral tradition, they're remembered like comrades. Which makes sense, really, if a creature carries your supplies, your shelter, and occasionally your escape plan. You probably start saying, "Thank you," whether it answers or not. The camel shifts again beneath you, and the sun climbs higher. In the distance, you see banners waving. A new outpost, a new plan, a new campaign. But you're already impressed. Because today, you didn't ride with an army. You rode with strategy on 4 legs and a tower full of maps. Your final 3 chuckles for the march. 1 camel refused to move until the battle started. Perfect timing or dramatic flair. Saladin's best scouts, probably the ones riding above the dust line with snacks and shade. Camel Tower's the only command center that occasionally stops to chew a bush. The sun is hot and entirely uninterested in your well-being. You're standing on the rocky edge of a Crusader encampment, wooden barricades, smoky fires, and soldiers with the kind of sunburns that suggest armor wasn't designed with desert fashion in mind. The mood is tense, not because of an ambush or a battle, but because they've seen something weird. And weird in medieval warfare tends to cause arguments. Word spreads quickly. The Saracens. They've brought towers on camels. You turn. Several knights squint into the haze. A scout attempts a drawing, but the result looks like a goose wearing a barn. No one knows what to call it. Is it a moving fortress? A mobile watchtower? Some kind of siege beast? To you, of course, it's old news. But to the Crusaders, it's like watching someone invent a tank out of spite. At first they laugh. One knight calls it a castle for cowards. Another suggests it's a parade float for monks. Then the laughter fades when they realize those towers aren't symbolic. They're functional. They move. They hold archers. They're hard to hit. And worst of all, they seem completely unfazed by terrain weather or sarcasm. Welcome to the awkward first encounter between European knights and the Camel Tower. There's a buzz in the command tent now. Some propose copying the design. Others want to shoot flaming bolts at the camels before they get close. One man insists they build their own towers on wagons. He's quickly reminded that wagons don't climb dunes, and most of them broke 2 days ago trying to cross a creek, so they try to adapt, which goes about as smoothly as you'd expect. In one recorded attempt, a small French unit tried to mount a lookout platform onto a donkey. The donkey refused to stand. In another, they stacked crates onto a war horse. The horse stood briefly, then panicked, sprinted into a latrine pit, and ended the experiment in disgrace and cabbage. Eventually, they settle on a plan. Observe, imitate, modify. European engineers begin sketching towers that could be disassembled and reassembled quickly, maybe even mounted on animals in emergencies. A few commanders toy with the idea of borrowed camels, but it turns out the animals are uncooperative, especially when being shouted at in French. So instead, they begin building mobile defenses inspired by the tower design wooden panels with arrow slits, wheeled frames for pushing cover across open fields, and even scaffolding strapped to oxen, who, by the way, did not sign up for this. Here's where your scholarly tension stirs. How much did medieval European armies really learn from these encounters? Some historians believe these moments sparked a gradual evolution, leading toward more flexible siege tactics, better awareness of enemy mobility, and ultimately more respect for local terrain. Others argue the influence was overstated, that admiration doesn't always lead to replication, especially when cultural pride gets in the way. Still, it's hard to deny the psychological impact. One chronicler notes that after the battle near Hatton, rumors spread of unscalable walls that marched with the enemy. It became a metaphor for unbeatable tactics, whether the tactic in question was structural strategic or simply riding a very tall, very rude animal. Back at camp, you watch a group of younger knights, Practice ducking behind makeshift shields while a man on a camel rides by holding a broom. It's both ridiculous and surprisingly effective. Progress in its clumsiest form. One sergeant mutters, "Mark my words, we'll be riding camels by next winter." Another replies, "Only if they come with chairs." The sun begins to dip. The practice ends, but the idea remains planted like a stubborn seed in the middle of the sand. Maybe you can't copy the tower perfectly, but you can't unsee it either. 3 tired giggles before sunset. One crusader insisted the camel tower was an illusion. Then it stepped on his tent. Medieval innovation. Try something. Watch it fail. Then blame the camel. The real enemy wasn't heat or sand. It was trying to look cool while copying someone else's fortress with rope and optimism. You're standing in a courtyard that smells like fresh rose water and slightly singed wool. The sun is kind, the breeze forgiving, and someone is brushing a camel's neck with what looks suspiciously like a silver comb. You've seen many things on this journey. Camels at war, at prayer, carrying towers full of maps, cakes, and grudges. But today, you're about to witness something far more fabulous. A fashion show for camel towers. Yes, you heard that right. In some cities of the medieval Islamic world, especially during festivals, royal processions, or diplomatic parades, tower camels weren't just functional. They were fashion-forward. Think less battlefield, more runway. You walk slowly past a lineup of camels, each with its own custom tower covering. The basic wooden frames are nowhere in sight. Instead, they're wrapped in embroidered silks stitched with crescent moons, geometric stars, and the occasional quote from poetry. A few towers have been painted gold. One features hanging glass lanterns that jingle with every sway. The camel next to you smells like frankincense. It glances sideways at your dusty cloak, clearly judging you. A handler steps forward and waves proudly to a nearby tower. This one imported dye from Damascus. Took 3 months. Worth every dinar. You nod solemnly, pretending to understand textile economics. This isn't just decorative. These elaborately adorned towers served a political purpose, broadcasting wealth stability and cultural refinement. If your camel tower looked like it belonged in a palace, then by association, you were someone important enough to move palaces around. In royal courts, from Cairo to Baghdad, entire artisans' guilds were devoted to these designs. They produced canopies, curtains, tassels, armor sleeves, padded seat cushions, and yes, tiny silver bells for those who wanted their tower to sound as impressive as it looked. Some towers even had signature scents, tiny clay burners hidden beneath the eaves, releasing custom blends of myrrh, cardamom, and wild desert mint. One chronicler described a sultan's caravan where each camel had its own assigned perfume, lest the towers blend and confuse the nose. Imagine that. A tactical perfume strategy. Because of course, now for your delightfully weird footnote of the evening. One tower, commissioned by a merchant prince in the 1200s, was allegedly decorated with real peacock feathers stitched into the walls so that they rustled in the wind like applause. The camel beneath it was nicknamed the Ambassador, and apparently threw a fit if someone touched the plumage without permission. All of this leads to tonight's light academic spark, were these decorated camel towers practical transport or performative propaganda? Historians love this question. Some argue the decorations were strictly ceremonial, used only during parades or processions. Others believe they were more widespread than records admit, especially in high-status travel. The fact that so many travelers mention the visual impact of these camel towers suggests that regardless of how often they were used, when they showed up, people noticed. It also reveals a lot about how style and mobility merged. In medieval urban centers, showing off your textile sophistication was as crucial as the size of your retinue. Your tower wasn't just your ride, it was your resume, your social media profile, and your diplomatic handshake. You sit on a bench as preparations continue. Two tailors are now adjusting the hem of a velvet cover draped over a tower painted like a garden. A third is arranging beaded strings to fall in perfect symmetry over the entrance flap. A young boy runs past shouting. The one with mirrors is next, and you wonder briefly if that tower is designed to reflect arrows or compliments. The camel itself stands still, or rather it poses. You watch as it turns slightly head-tilted neck angle to show off the best side of its tower. Someone claps. The camel blinks slowly, basking in admiration, like a true professional. Your final thoughts drift toward what it must have felt like to ride inside one of these mobile masterpieces. The view of crowds parting, the smell of cinnamon and sun-warmed linen, the sound of silk flapping gently above your head while your camel strolled like a supermodel on a mission. Tonight's fashionably late chuckles. Is that a war camel or a mobile ballroom? Yes. One camel demanded only gold tassels. After all, standards are everything. Forget horsepower. This was thread power. It's raining. Not a storm, not a downpour. Just a soft, persistent drizzle that smells faintly of wet earth and mild regret. You're crouched beside a small caravan, halted for shelter, watching droplets roll off a curved wooden beam like they're late to something. And above you, swaying gently, with every wind gust, is a camel tower, which surprisingly is not leaking, because this isn't just any wooden box on legs. This is a marvel of medieval engineering, built to withstand the two things that ruin every desert journey: sandstorms and unexpected rain. Welcome to the underappreciated brilliance of weatherproof camel towers. At first glance, the design seems simple wood rope, some canvas. But look closer, and you'll see a layered system of slatted roofing, angled like a tent's peak to deflect water, with narrow gaps at the base for drainage. Canvas flaps can be rolled down and tied to protect against wind-blown grit. The joints are wrapped in oiled leather, and the whole structure sits on a shock-absorbing bed of padded reeds. You're told this tower was made in Nishapur, where rainy seasons sneak up on travelers like punchlines. A merchant next to you chuckles. This one, it's kept my maps dry since 1282. You peer inside the tower. The walls are lined with tightly woven wool panels, lightweight, but dense enough to trap warmth during cold nights. A small shelf holds dried fruit prayer beads and what appears to be a flask of mint syrup. There's a lantern hook designed to swing inward in rough weather, and a scroll tube with a wax cap. Not a drop inside. The camel underneath makes a low sound, something like a sigh of superiority. And this isn't a one-off. Across medieval trade routes and military camps, these weather-adapted camel towers evolved to handle the full range of chaos-blinding heat, sideways rain, sudden sand gusts, and the occasional snowstorm if you wandered too far north. One treatise from a 14th century Persian engineer even includes sketches of modular tower parts, wooden inserts that could be swapped depending on the season. There were arched roofs for rain-flat ones, for cargo, and hooded covers to reduce heat absorption. Another scroll recommends stuffing mint leaves between the tower joints in summer to encourage both scent and civility, because nothing says luxury like a fortress that smells fresh when it's 110 degrees outside. Now comes your quirky detail of the evening. In some caravans, the tea shelf was considered sacred. A few towers were designed with a special platform, slightly elevated and sloped for brewing during rest breaks. One account mentions a tower that had a permanent teapot cradle padded to avoid rattling during motion. When it rained, the spout was covered with a tiny hood made of goat leather. Of course, here's your slow-burning scholarly tension. Were these innovations common knowledge or elite modifications? Some historians believe they were widespread, especially in regions with variable climates. Others argue they were privileges of the rich, only wealthy merchants, or state-sponsored caravans could afford to build towers with drainage systems and rot-resistant woods. But one thing's agreed: a dry tower was a powerful advantage, especially when your survival depended on dry ink, dry food, and dry morale. You lean back under the eaves of your borrowed tower and listen to the rain drum gently on the roof. It's a comforting sound, a reminder that even in the harshest terrains, someone thought ahead. Someone cared enough to make sure a stranger could sit in the middle of nowhere, completely dry, with a pocket full of almonds and a view of the world drifting by. Tonight's damp but dry chuckles. The Camel's tower stayed dry, but the rider forgot their shoes outside. Regret Medieval Edition. Some towers had better water drainage than 15th century city halls. You haven't felt true envy until you've seen someone brewing tea mid-downpour while riding a camel. The desert is quiet tonight, eerily so. No wind, no chatter, just the rhythmic plodding of hooves on packed sand and the creak of wood under shifting weight. But this caravan isn't carrying spices, weapons, or bolts of dyed silk. It's carrying books, not just one or two, not scrolls hastily stuffed into saddlebags. This is a traveling library, and it rides on the backs of camels like a monastery on the move. You're riding alongside one of the most curious and underappreciated institutions of the medieval Islamic world, the Camel Caravan Library, a mobile archive that connected scholars, judges, poets, and dreamers across entire kingdoms. Ahead of you, 3 camels move in deliberate formation. Their towers are wide, low, and reinforced. From the outside, they look like trading crates, but when one of the riders unlatches a flap, you see its shelves. Tiered, padded shelves. Scrolls nestled like sleeping cats. Manuscripts tied with colored silk. Even a small cabinet labeled ink pots handled gently. The camel sighs. The books don't move. Everything's balanced just right. The librarian riding next to you is not what you expect. He's wearing a dusty brown robe, spectacles tied with a bit of ribbon behind his ears, and a belt pouch that jingles, likely not with coins, but bookmarks. He tells you they're en route to a madrasa 2 towns east, delivering requested texts, theology, astronomy, a newly translated Galen treatise on medicine, and a collection of fairy tales. I pack for the soul and the spleen, he says, not quite joking. You learn that these camel libraries weren't as rare as they sound. In parts of Persia, Egypt, and North Africa, especially in academic centers like Fez, Baghdad, and Shiraz, when scholars couldn't travel to the books traveled to them. Wealthy patrons, rulers, and even guilds funded camel scriptoria, equipping towers with cushioned storage, weatherproof lining, and an extra camel just for parchment. And here's the whimsical detail that wins the Night 1 Camel Tower was designed with fold-out desks. Yes, hinged wooden panels that drop down into mini writing tables so scribes could transcribe while in motion. You imagine someone trying to compose poetry while bobbing across dunes, stopping only to refill the ink and readjust their posture. It's almost absurd. Almost. But it worked. You peek into one of the towers during a rest break. Inside is a small oil lamp, a sealed box of wax tablets, and a rolled map marked with pinholes and ink notes. In the corner sits a half-eaten fig cake and a copy of Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine, gently swaying with the movement of the camel's breath. And yes, there's even a compartment marked Restricted Texts for qualified readers only. You're told these include sensitive medical knowledge banned poems and, according to one apprentice, very confusing riddles. As the caravan moves on, you begin to realize this isn't just about access to knowledge. It's about preservation through motion. When cities were attacked, when libraries were threatened by war or disaster, some collections survived simply because they were never meant to stay still. Scholars still debate whether these camel libraries were temporary wartime solutions or a recognized system of knowledge exchange. Some argue they were emergency measures. Others believe they were deliberately mobile part of a broader philosophy that wisdom, like water, must flow. You shift in your saddle, watching the towers sway gently ahead like ships on a quiet sea. Inside those wooden crates are lives, the thoughts of thinkers, the questions of students, the diagrams of stars, and the creatures carrying them, still chewing, still walking, still entirely unimpressed by the weight of civilization on their backs. 3 scholarly snorts to end the night. One librarian trained his camel to stop walking every time he misspelled something. The only thing heavier than a tower of books, a tower of book critics, medieval e-readers, no batteries, but very good posture. The sun is just beginning to rise, painting the horizon in honey and brass. You're at the edge of a desert checkpoint, wooden beams forming an improvised gate guarded by 2 men with ledgers and suspicious squints. A caravan approaches slow and dusty, trailing spice-scented wind and creaking camel towers. And then from behind the guard's tent it appears. A single camel steps forward, taller than the rest, its tower dark with lacquered wood and iron trim. On the front, painted in tidy calligraphy, is a single word, audit. Welcome to one of the lesser-known uses of camel towers in the medieval world, the mobile tax inspection post. Yes, even in the 13th century, no one escaped paperwork. The camel kneels with practiced dignity, and out steps not a soldier or traitor, but a man in a robe so neat it practically hums with judgment. He carries a scroll case, a writing board, and a small pouch labeled emergency ink. His assistant follows, holding a tin of sealing wax and a very tired-looking abacus. They are tower auditors, officials tasked with roaming from checkpoint to checkpoint, verifying manifests, collecting overdue levies, and occasionally confiscating suspicious honey jars. You trail behind them into the tower and are immediately struck by how official it feels. A bench bolted into one side, a desk that folds down, hooks for coin pouches and tags, a scroll rack with tiny notes like tariff exceptions, 1241, 2065, and list of camels who bit collectors do not assign again. There's even a cubby marked bribe detection samples. You try not to ask. The auditor sits calmly, motioning for the first merchant to approach. A crate is opened. Spices, dried figs, dyed wool. Everything is logged, weighed, sniffed, and taxed. The camel tower sways slightly with the breeze, and a small wind chime attached to the ceiling gives a single polite ding every time a transaction is completed. Of course, the process wasn't always polite. Historical records show that in places like Mamluk Egypt and Safavid Persia, roving tax camels were sometimes resented. Traders called them wooden vultures, and there were entire folk songs written about avoiding the tower, with two shadows a poetic way of referring to the camel and its paperwork. But these towers served an essential role. In vast territories where centralized bureaucracy was difficult, they became pop-up bureaucratic offices. Fast-moving, hard to avoid, and sometimes uncomfortably efficient. One official report describes a camel tower that functioned as a full mobile court audit desk in the front, minor judge in the back, and a chest of sample goods used to compare taxable quality. A particularly spicy pepper could land you a fine for declared as dried but clearly smoked. And here's your absurd yet true footnote. There was a rumor that some audit camels were trained to grunt if a crate was heavier than declared. Is it proven? No. Is it delightful? Absolutely. Your scholarly question of the morning: were these tax towers symbols of effective governance or just mobile irritants? Some historians argue they were practical innovations capable of reaching remote routes and keeping trade fair. Others see them as instruments of overreach symbols of creeping state control into every bag of salt and bolt of fabric. Either way, they were memorable. Back at the tower, the inspector stamps a seal onto a document, passes it to the merchant, and signals for the next. A goat bleats from somewhere, perhaps objecting to being counted as cargo. You sit quietly on a spare cushion in the corner, sipping strong tea from a clay cup with internal use only scratched into the side. And for a moment, you admire the system, dusty, creaky, and definitely awkward, but it works. 3 bureaucratic belly laughs to close the shift. One merchant tried to bribe the auditor with raisins. It worked briefly. Some camels were better at spotting unpaid taxes than their riders. You haven't known true fear until you see a scroll labeled Annual Reevaluation Tower Edition. You're standing in the middle of a village square, lit by torchlight and suspense. The drums have started. The air smells like boiled lentils and stage fright, and a boy with a reed flute just tripped over a stool labeled Prop Goat Fake. The crowd leans in ready. But you're not here for the stew or the drama. You're here because tonight's stage is moving. Literally. Right before your eyes, a camel lumbers into the square. But this one's different. Its tower is wider than usual, open at the sides, draped with theatrical banners. Painted faces peer out. A curtain pulls back. A small girl appears, strikes a pose, and declares, "Behold, the Prince of the Sands." born of storm and song. Welcome to medieval camel theater. Yes, real thing. In festival towns and traveling troops across the Middle East and North Africa, camel towers were sometimes transformed into mobile stages, roaming platforms for plays, poetry readings, and slightly chaotic moral lessons. Think of them as the medieval version of a touring Broadway show. If Broadway ran on hooves and hay. Tonight's performance. A tale of a hero who turns into a donkey, gets cursed by a moon priestess, and wins back his form by solving riddles delivered by a very opinionated chicken. Classic. The actors jump on and off the camel tower with rehearsed agility. One tower flap reveals a fake kitchen. Another opens to reveal a puppet dangling from a pole. The camel, to its credit, stands perfectly still, chewing something that probably belonged to the prop table. These tower stages weren't just party tricks. They were cultural events, especially in regions where permanent theaters didn't exist or weren't accessible to travelers and villagers. With a few cleverly hinged panels, painted cloth, and a bit of balancing courage, performers could bring entire productions to marketplaces, rural crossroads, and seasonal gatherings. You edge closer to the tower between acts and sneak a peek inside. Behind the curtain, baskets of masks, water jugs, a copy of a script scribbled in 3 different hands, and a jar labeled emergency raisins. Essential. The lead performer is a woman in a patchwork tunic. She waves. "We're headed to the coast next," she says, adjusting a feathered hat. They love camel drama out there. And here's your scholarly spin. Were these tower theaters part of an organized tradition or improvised wonders? Academic records are patchy. Some historians say this was a regular fixture among Sufi festivals and itinerant entertainers. Others suggest it was an occasional, spectacular adaptation, repurposing towers usually built for trade or travel into something joyful and absurd. One folktale from 14th century Morocco describes a haunted theater tower that told its own stories if no one spoke for too long. Another describes a camel so used to theater life it would kneel anytime someone started rhyming in couplets. You're not sure if that's historically reliable, but honestly, it feels possible. You sit back as the final act begins. The hero, now human again, saves the kingdom by impersonating a fish. The music swells. The camel shifts slightly to adjust the lighting. Okay, not on purpose, but still impressive. The crowd erupts into cheers. And when it's done, the tower closes like a suitcase. Props are packed, curtains tied down, actors hop off and begin folding their costumes. The camel yawns. By midnight, the stage is gone, walking slowly toward the horizon, with 3 children still quoting lines behind it. 3 standing ovations in chuckle form. Some towers had better acoustics than actual stone theaters, provided the camel didn't burp during monologues. Touring camel drama, the only show where the lead actor might spit on the audience between scenes. You haven't seen true stage magic until a costume change happens mid-bounce at a brisk trot. Its paint is faded. The wood's gone silver from sun and wind. One of the shutters hangs loose, swinging with a gentle knock-knock each time the camel takes a step. But still, it moves forward and everyone treats it like something precious. Because it is. This is the last known traveling tower caravan. You join them at camp that night. No festival, no parade, just a circle of firelight and quiet voices. The old man, his beard, long his robes patched with care, invites you to climb up and see the inside of the tower. It takes longer than expected, and your knees audibly disapprove. But when you reach the top, the air smells like cedar and memories. That line stays with you. Because it's not just about transport anymore, or status, or strategy. It's about legacy, about the stubbornness of culture, the gentle refusal to let something beautiful vanish without a final march. In one of the compartments, you find a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, a cracked ceramic cup, a page from a love letter, and a tiny silver bell. Each object tells a story. Not loud ones, but stories that creak and breathe and settle. When the fire dies down, the old man sleeps in the tower. The scribe curls beneath it. You lie nearby, watching stars blink overhead, and wonder how many of them have seen these towers moving across the sand over the centuries. And here's your final academic nudge. Is this caravan the last of its kind because the world changed, or because we stopped looking for them? Dusk now, that deep gold-pink hour where everything looks like it's made of candlelight and long memories. You're standing at the edge of a ridge, looking down on what once was a battlefield and now just whined over old stones. Below you, the last of the camel towers are being dismantled. The wood is stacked gently, the straps coiled with care. No rush, no shouting, just the rhythm of ending. This is the final chapter of the Camel Castle era. For generations, these four-legged fortresses had roamed the sands, part transport, part symbol, part tactical brilliance. But nothing lasts forever, and even the humblest mobile turret must someday give way to newer machines, sharper ideas, and frankly, less moody transport options. You descend the slope slowly, your sandals crunching on gravel. At the bottom, a group of soldiers is loading the last supplies from a camel named Sarah. Her tower, small battered, painted with stars, is being taken apart for the final time. She looks relieved. You feel a little heartbroken. So, what happened? Why did these walking castles disappear? One word: gunpowder. As firearms and cannons swept across the medieval world, the value of tall wooden platforms declined rapidly. It turns out being elevated was not an advantage when bullets and cannonballs became part of the conversation. No amount of clever tower design could protect you from exploding iron. And so the camel towers began to vanish, not all at once, but piece by piece. They were too visible, too slow, too flammable. But there's more to it than just weapons. The world itself was changing. Trade routes shifted. Armies became more centralized, relying on standardized equipment and permanent bases. Diplomacy moved indoors. Pilgrimages gained state support and stone-built rest stops. And frankly, people got tired of building furniture that walked away when spooked. You pass a crate labeled Signal Flags Retired, another marked T-Set, Tower Number 7. It's hard not to feel like you're visiting an estate sale for a very specific type of brilliance. But not everyone forgot. In dusty corners of archives, in sketches drawn on the backs of letters, in poems scrawled beside military dispatches, the towers live on. One Persian lullaby mentions the beast with windows on its back. A Spanish traveler describes seeing a fortress float across the dunes. A North African folk tale tells of a camel tower so loyal it carried its sleeping rider all the way home, even after the war had ended. Academics still argue whether the towers were practical genius or theatrical nonsense. But you know better now. You've seen the camps, the kitchens, the prayer rooms, the poems. The castles didn't walk on sand. They walked through stories, through time, through lives. As the last camel kneels for the night, the handler removes her bridle and runs a hand along her neck. "You carried an army," he says softly. "Now you can rest." "You smile," she snorts. And here, under a twilight sky, surrounded by the ghosts of wood and rope and purpose, you understand what the towers truly were: a beautiful compromise between imagination and necessity. A place to aim arrows, to write verses, to sip tea, to see further. One day, someone might try again. Maybe not with camels, maybe not with towers, but with the same spirit. Because the need to rise above the dust is eternal. 3 final hums to close this journey. Camels never bragged, but let's be honest, they earned the right. Tower dismantled time to open a very niche furniture museum. In the end, even castles get tired feet.